Thank you for staying with us. Good Morning Kenya gets to continue. And right now we talk about shaping the urban future. And I am more than privileged to be having two presidents on a set today as we get to just find ways in which we can engineer a safe living space for the growing community. I have with me on my immediate right, we have George Arabbu, and George Arabbu is the President, Architectural Association of Kenya. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Vivian.
All right, and right next to George, we have Engineer Shammah Kiteme, and he is the President, Institution of Engineers of Kenya. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Good morning.
All right, it's a pleasure to have the both of you on set today. And it is at a time when things are not looking so good, matters, buildings, you know, and all of that, specifically in Nairobi. I am sure that you have seen and you know of the collapsed buildings. Or the collapsing buildings, because it's not just one, there have been two buildings so far, and we are going to be getting into that just to try and see where exactly is the problem and where does the problem begin exactly. But before we get into that bit of our conversation, when we talk about shaping the urban future and looking at ways in which we can engineer a safe living space for our communities, how do you define a safe living space? Let me begin with you, yeah.
All right. Thank you, Vivian, once again, and good morning, Kenya. Well, it's a safe living space is one that is experienced. You know, it cannot be perceived by visual, by one, factor of just visual. And unfortunately, when it comes to construction, for example, we tend to focus more on visual appeal. So does the building look good? Is it painted? Does it look fancy? But we forget that it's about the experience. So a safe living space is whereby a family can be raised, for example, kids can play. So we look at the vulnerable. The aged people can move around easily, between the various spaces where you are living, where you're working, and where you are recreating, where you meet people. A safe living space is where community is fostered. The sense of community that you're not cut off from people. For example, you have common spaces like what you call the courtyards, the plazas. If you look back into how Africans used to build their homesteads, for example, you have houses surrounding a central space. If you scale that up to urban areas, then you are looking at that courtyard as a space where people like Uhuru Park, for example, okay? Like the estates, the old estates that were done with those central courts where kids play. And then now, of course, you go into the house. How is that house planned? Can you be able to do the activities that you're supposed to be doing? The normal activities like cooking, living, sleeping, and meeting your family. And then, is that space connected to nature in such a way that it is healthy? Because if you have a house, a building, okay, so I want to differentiate between our home and a structure called a building. Okay. A home is a space which you can raise a family and do the normal things that a human being needs. A building is a structure. It could be a go down which has no lights, which is not comfortable, which is cold. Is the temperature normal? There's something called thermal comfort. Things to do with the daylight, because we need light as human beings. So all these are aspects that we need to factor in to consider what is a safe living space. And it can scale right from the house to the street level and the citywide scope. Yeah.
All right. Engineer Kiteme, what's your, your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think the architect has done a very good intro. Let me start by saying good morning, all Kenyans and those watching us. A safe living place has various aspects, like already alluded to. And I think first, as a structural engineer, I should not have a situation whereby it is subject to collapse because of compromise in terms of the structural integrity. So as an engineer, I will be very careful to make sure that the structural integrity of the living space is guaranteed. And that means under the normal occupancy and loads, and subject to the reasonable environmental factors like wind, earthquake, etc., that space should not collapse in a catastrophic manner and cause harm, death, etc. And so that would, of importance for me, constitute a safe living space. But I already alluded to, I had a colleague of mine who worked somewhere, and because of the working conditions, his eyesight was affected. He started wearing specs, like a permanent disability was inflicted on him because of the living space that he was subjected to. And therefore, for me, lighting is also an important aspect. And I'm saying so because then electrical engineers, while structural engineers are supposed to guarantee structural integrity, electrical engineers come into place to make sure that then the lighting, the lumens, the lux, the amount of lux that we are dealing with is within acceptable standards, and it will not inflict harm to the occupants. The other very critical elements is, of course, the ventilation. Ventilation is a space where mechanical engineers are involved in. And you want to think about the space you're dealing with. If it's a hospital situation, for example, sometimes we have forced ventilation, where we have positive or negative pressure, for example. And therefore, mechanical engineers would be involved in making sure that heating, ventilation, and air conditioning are factors that you consider in the living space. Now, we have to consider environmental conditions, like alluded to, and where environmental conditions don't provide conducive atmosphere for a safe living space, then as professionals, we come in to force the conditions that are safe for living. And therefore, all those aspects play to make sure that whether you're talking about structurally safe, whether you're talking about lighting, we're talking about ventilation, we even talk about waste management. And proper waste management will actually define if you're dealing with a safe living space or not, because by virtue of us living, we generate waste. And therefore there must be a proper way to manage the waste, whether it is solid waste or liquid waste, which is wastewater, for example, so that we handle it properly to make sure that we have a safe living space. And living means healthy. There are two terms that we talk about. One is a building that will subject you to unhealthy living conditions and you can fall sick, or a building that will be health enhancing. And so safe living is a big conversation that we grapple with as professionals in built environment.
Yeah, and just from, what both of you have mentioned, it requires a lot. I mean, I didn't even think about lighting, but it's something that, also came up. So it requires a lot. Before we get, deeper into that bit of safe living, I want us to address the elephant in the room, which is also part of of what we are talking about today. That is the building collapses. And I'm sure this is a question that many Kenyans are asking. Where are we going wrong? Where is the problem? Is the problem in poor designing? Is it in poor construction? Is it in, just poor, when it comes to supervision? We have work supervision, in this nation. Where exactly is the problem? Is it a failure in regulation? Is it a systemic problem? Where is the problem?
Well, Vivian, it's an interesting situation we are in, because I feel like we know where the problem is. Kenyans know where the problem is. We just don't want to talk about it. We also know where the solution are, what the solution is. Let me broaden the topic a little bit, and I will leave the engineer to talk about more of the structural issues, especially when it comes to collapse of buildings. We have systemic issues that this collapse is just one small aspect of it. So we have a situation where majority of what we are building is wrong. Okay. And just because it's standing doesn't mean that that building is good or safe. We don't have a way of enforcing existing regulations. We lack capacity in terms of implementation. And even the government itself, and in this case we are talking about the county governments, because they are the ones who are in charge of urban planning and development control, because that's a devolved function, are not able, let me put it this way, there is no will. Let's start with the will. I don't think there's a will, and they also don't have capacity. Most counties give very little budget to this development control process. Who is monitoring what's going on? Okay, so this statistic is that the statistics are there. The fact of the matter is that majority of Kenyans don't even think they need professionals. Majority of Kenyans want to build by themselves, for themselves, and they consider it as a cost-cutting measure. But it's a risky one. Yeah. Okay? The risk is that you are investing a lot of money, so you are risking losing that money, but at the same time you are risking developing something that is not quality. So you're going to risk the lives of the people that you are building for. In Nairobi, for example, and I think nationwide, the ratio of developers or the landlords to the tenants, we are talking about, for every 10 buildings, only one of them could be the owner of the building living in it. In Nairobi, about 8% or less are the people who are landlords. And developers, the people who are building, investing, making decisions on how we are building and what should be built, is a paltry less than 1% of Kenyans. Which means the average Kenyan is not on the table of deciding what is being built. If you move into a house and you don't even know how it was done, because ideally you're supposed to be given information, like what engineer was mentioning here earlier. Electrical, if you look at the utilities, electrical lines, the service lines like water or waste, you can't see that. But the ideal situation is that you know where they are because there's information about that. Like when you buy a car, you get a manual. You know, you can go and Google for the engine of a particular car, and you can say this car is like this. Yes. But you're living in a house where you could be trying to nail a photo of your family onto the wall, and then you hit an electric conduit and get electrocuted. Why? Because you don't know. So the genesis of all this is that we are used to building irregularly. We are used to building without input from professionals. And then we are not assured of the quality of materials that we are using, because someone is not doing their job, or they are not capacitated enough to do the right job.
Yeah, and Engineer Kiteme, I would love for you to also weigh in on that. You know, we were speaking earlier and you mentioned that since 1990, we've had 100 building collapses in the country. Why is this something that is recurrent? It keeps coming year in, year out. Where are we missing, you know, where are the gaps in this?
Vivian, let me start by really passing my condolences on the lives lost. For the last 2 weeks, we have lost lives. Life is precious, and it saddens me that we have lost lives in building collapses. And so my condolences. And what pains more is because from where we sit as professionals in built environment, these are preventable. But we have started by quoting statistics. It is true, from 90s we have had over 100 buildings collapsing. And not just collapsing, we have lost lives, over 200 of the people dead. And not only just that, we have also lost investments. And it is running over 3 billion investments or lost. And so the question is, just like you've asked, what is the cause? Studies have been done, and overall, you can summarize them into poor workmanship. You can also see an element of substandard materials, construction materials. We also see an element of poor structural design, and we have also seen maintenance issues where the maintenance is not happening, and also we have elements of non-compliance with set regulations to make sure that buildings are safe. Now, there are many causes and all that, but they are largely systemic. And I will tell you, those studies have also recommended remedies. One of the remedy recommended has been engage accredited checkers, for example, to make sure every stage there is peer review, there is a proof checking to make sure that we are good to proceed to the next stage. There is a proposal to involve, for example, inspectors. And this should come from the county because planning is a devolved function, as alluded by President Arabbu. Counties are very vital and critical. While the developers are supposed to retain professionals, in countries where this menace has been stemmed, there is the professionals who ascertain they are happy with the work that has been done, for example, with the arrangement of steel and all that before casting has been allowed. But then there's also inspection that comes from the county, for example, or a national entity that comes to ascertain, yes, the excavation is safe, you can now cast. The arrangement of steel is okay, now you can cast. So inspections happen, and studies have recommended engagement of inspectors. But what have we seen? We have seen an element whereby there is a lot of impunity from developers. They say, he who pays a piper calls the tune. They have the money, and therefore they will make a decision whether to retain a professional or not. And they even make a decision whether to fire this professional and get another one at whim. So what we're saying is that if we had to address this menace, the developer must be held accountable. No one has been put behind jail for over 100 buildings collapsing in this country from 1990s. So we are literally letting everyone go scot-free. No one is being held accountable. But the other important thing, and my colleague president has mentioned it, have professionals. Professionals are trained. The architect, the structural engineer, the mechanical engineer, the electrical engineer, the QS, the planner, they are trained to make sure that they can actually be involved in a process that produces safe structures that are not collapsing, and especially structural engineers. You need the structural engineer to do the calculations. We need to have geotechnical investigations done to determine the soil bearing capacity so that they can design the foundations so that your building does not collapse. And therefore, involvement of professionals and, enhancing the inspection capacity in counties becomes very critical. The problem we are seeing is that the development that we submit to counties for approval, they are looking at as a revenue generation aspect, not as a building safety aspect, where they are supposed to be involved to make sure the buildings that come after the approval, they are safe. And that's something we must emphasize. But critically also involve, for example, mechanical engineers so that you have a safe building, drainage and all that. You involve electrical engineers, for example, so that we're talking about safety in terms of power and all that, because we're living in power. So there are systemic issues. We know the causes because we have studied them. We have recommendations for how to overcome this. What we know is that enforcement is lacking.
And I want to actually pick on that. No one is being held accountable. And I feel like that is where the biggest problem is at, because that, okay, we saw that building collapsing. No one was brought to book for the collapsing of it. And you know, from the stages you've just mentioned that need to take place, the procedure before construction, you know, comes to be, I am sure there are different, you know, approvals, you know, and people are known. You definitely know who's the developer of this project. You have to know who approved this construction, because I'm sure you need to do some signing, no? So why is it that we never get anyone, you know, brought to book when we have building collapses? Is it that it just disappears like thin air? It's like you can't trace anyone, and I'm sure it's all traceable.
Yes, well, I think, Vivian, we are in a very strange situation, and I like using this analogy that imagine a situation where majority of Kenyans went to witch doctors to be treated. And we assume it's normal. We are happy with that. That is actually the situation with construction. That it is okay to do things irregularly. It's okay to do bad construction. You will be shocked the number of people who, let's say if you come from a developed country, or maybe if people who have traveled out, one of the things they realize, the difference is the quality of buildings, the quality of construction. It's not about cost, you know, it's not about, because if you are doing a stone building, whether you are doing a house in Kileleshwa or you are doing a house in Kibera using stone, the price is the same. The stone is the same, cement is the same. Yeah. The only difference might be that maybe someone doing it in Kileleshwa is appealing to some foreigner and they are able to do something different. Or they are appealing to some Kenyan who has a bigger pocket, so they are able to do something that looks nice. But the cost is the same. Now, the issues of record keeping is very important. We don't have good records. Yeah. Like I said earlier, you build a house, you can't even tell where the sewer line is going. Okay, there's a toilet blockage, the fundi can't come and block it easily, or someone has to demolish the house to find out where, you know, something. Like, remember well, it's probably a long time ago in the 90s when Nakumatt downtown caught fire. And they couldn't get the source of the fire. They were speculating, oh, it came from here, I don't know where, you know, stuff like that. And they couldn't even put it out in good time, for example. So we are just living blind in our space. We are building blindly, and everything is what engineer said, that the developer, the builders, the landlord, the people who have the money, because every project starts with money. Yeah. Okay? So if I have money, I want to go and build, and I'm the one making the decisions. And what do? Because I have the money, I think I know everything. So I go and look for my relative who's idling at home. I tell him, I want you to come and become the fundi here. Okay? I go and look for the hardware. You know, a lot of Kenyans buy chumas from the hardware. They go to the hardware guy and they tell them, I want to build a 2-story house, chuma gani ndatumia. Okay? So instead of going to a doctor to get a diagnostic and then get a prescription, then go to the pharmacy to buy the medicine, we are going straight to the pharmacy and saying, I have a stomach problem, what do I need? So the guy who's selling the pharmacy gives it. That's exactly what's happening in the construction sector. So, one, the process is complex. Let me put it this way. Even if you are building a simple house, even a thatched hut, the process of going through that is complex. Even where you have consultants, things can go wrong. That is the reality. The issue, the difference comes in when you don't involve professionals, the risk of things going wrong increases tenfold. So one, we have a problem with record keeping. So the county doesn't even know what is being built. Okay? They are collecting money, as engineer is saying. So that amount of money, which is supposed to go towards ensuring safety, inspections happen, quality control from material. Like even where they're being mined, the person who's mining the stones, okay? The mchanga that is being brought, because remember sand is not just sand. You can't just pick any sand and use. There's specific sand, there's a level of grit, the sizes of the particles that only an engineer can tell when it's brought on site. Now, if you skip all that, you are literally compounding the problem. And if by a miracle, the house remains standing, it remains that, a miracle. But scientifically, because it's a complex process, you need to monitor and evaluate and report. When construction is going on, there are meetings that go on, there is inspection. So an architect will go to site, or an engineer will go to site and give a site inspection notes or instruction. So in some cases, things can also go wrong. For example, when you are pouring the concrete, a slight difference can be costly. Maybe you end up with more concrete than you need, or less. When you are doing the mixing, or you are using the wrong paint. You know, there's something called lead in paint. Most people don't know. There's hundreds of paint companies in this country. Lead, which has been banned globally, Kenya is one of the signatories to this. A couple of years ago, we started a very serious campaign on manufacturers or importers of paint should not have lead. Why? Because lead is poisonous, and it's usually more, especially for kids. But because there are very many paint companies, and because we are price conscious, so every time you go and buy paint, you are saying which is the cheapest. And then you don't look at the ingredients. So all these are compounding, and then there is no one checking, and then there's no record. So we can't fall back and say, what caused the sunbeam collapse? Can we learn from that or whatever? So we don't have all this. And then we are groping blindly towards an urban future where we are compounding the building. By 2050, every building we need by then is not been built yet. The population of Nairobi doubling means that we are yet to build twice as many buildings are exiting Nairobi. So if we are not learning from what we have done wrong, we are going to double the problem.
Yeah, because nothing changes if
nothing changes. So how do we even get who is liable? So we need to go back and say, we implement the laws we have, and we use the right people, and then we enforce the issues of inspection, we enforce the issues of being compliant, and to the point whereby it should become criminal not to have these records. Lastly, let's just mention on this particular one that Nairobi is looking at regularizing the irregular construction. So what does regularizing look like? You need to do the checks and look back and say, what can be fixed? So we do retrofitting. So if a building has a structural issue, we structurally enforce it. If it has lead in paint, we remove it. If it has no daylight, we insist by increasing the then you regularize. But I am afraid it may just be tupatia pesa, approval, move on. That is where the challenge is.
Wow. Are the current building codes sufficient, engineer?
Wow. I think I will want to respond to your question.
Okay.
But perhaps also start where he has left.
Okay.
You see, what we do when involved in construction sector is actually a science. It is not voodoo. It is science. And you don't mess with science. It punishes you. If you do not design the structure to carry certain type of a load, and you subject that structure to that load, it will collapse. And the collapse is catastrophic. It is going to cost life. Yeah. So what we do is science. You can't replace that. And that then means the necessity of having professionals, everyone intending to do any development, they must not think an alternative to that. Let me tell you, even my small development, I involve the architect. I'm a structural engineer. I want the electrical engineer, I want the mechanical engineer, however small it is, because these are people who spend years in the university, spend years of experience and all that. They see a problem from a distance, because that is area of specialty. So it actually saves you money to involve professionals. You know, when you have problems in court, the court, the bar and the bench, you can only have an advocate either side. And so we don't have room to negotiate. We have to go to an advocate. When you are going to the hospital, you are willing to engage the most expensive clinician because you don't want to compromise with your health. Yeah. Now, where we live, the spaces we live, they are as important. Why do you want to live in a space where you do not have a professional who can guarantee safety of where you're staying? But the other thing, and most critically, a very big problem we have, and that is where he left his statement, is corruption. Where we want to cut corners and not get the right approvals, for example. And even some authorities in counties, they are not willing to do due diligence and making sure that the approval process adds value, because they are willing to receive bribes and get compromised. Some of the recent collapses, and we are waiting for reports, we see them. But already what we can see in public raises so many questions. Yeah. For example, you need to go to the county to get approval for architectural and structural and stuff like that. Then you see a development proceeding without structural approval, for example. That development has been cleared by the county. It has a compliance certificate from the National Construction Authority. How on earth did that happen? And if there are inspections happening, what are you inspecting? Are you establishing that the person on record as a structural engineer is a structural engineer that is involved? When you go to the site, are you able to check the records? Are there site meetings? Have you done material tests, steel, concrete, cement? Because, like I alluded, one of the costs is substandard materials. We have also seen substandard cement in the industry, substandard steel in the industry. What are these inspections being done? Or are we just having inspectors passing by and they are given money and they give okay? So corruption is also really a big menace.
Yeah.
But I think you asked about
the codes. Are they sufficient?
the codes.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, I was involved in the committee that developed the Building Code 2024. That code is excellent.
Okay.
We did comparative studies from other countries, Australia, Malaysia. We checked other codes, and I was one of the experts involved in developing the Building Code 2024. It is super. It has provisions that guide what kinds of checks needs to be done. The developer has to comply with the requirement of Clause 5. The responsibility is spelled out clearly. There are specifications for design for the living spaces, what you need to design architecturally, what you need to design so that the structure is safe, the structural standards, design standards are provided for.
Yeah.
There are provisions for mechanical aspects, electrical aspects for the design for the building. There are provisions for health, safety and environment, quality assurance, environmental design and green buildings. The building code we have 2024, which I was part of experts preparing, is excellent. The question is compliance. The question is enforcement. And therefore, if we are to fix this problem, we have first of all to accept we have allowed a situation which is eating us. The buildings are collapsing. We are dying through these processes. We are compromising construction material, steel, cement. We are not retaining professionals to make sure that the construction is safe. This now becomes part of our culture of allowing what is unacceptable. And I want to allude to Mishuki. When he came to be the cabinet minister and you saw what he was able to do.
The reform.
He did not bring in new things.
Yeah.
He just came, provided the required leadership. The problem we have in the industry is the leadership, enforcement. Can we have someone put their foot on the ground and say, the madness must stop? Provide leadership. John Maxwell says, everything rises and falls on leadership. We have failure of leadership. And we have seen, not just here, in Mombasa the other day, we had the Leaning Tower of Mombasa, which was blown up by the military.
Yes.
The report that we received from the governor indicated that 61% of the approvals done in that Mombasa County are done by only 3 engineers, 61%. 75% of approvals done, they're only done by 5 architects. Now, when I checked back a reference year like 2024, how many buildings were approved in Mombasa? There were about 277. So if you now extrapolate that, you can see one professional is responsible for how many buildings. Can they supervise them? Not possible. What does that tell you? There is a big problem of credentials buying. There is a big problem of failure by the regulators to enforce. Where was, for example, the body responsible to check that the architects involved, the engineers response and all that, and of course the contractors, the regulators. What is their role in this mess you're seeing? So the problem we're having is enforcement, and we need leadership to address this mess.
All right, from that point, we take a break and then we get back to continue with this conversation that is really needed. Let's take a break.